we're back. We're going to be doing another stream. I think I'm going to be doing these after every single episode of House of the Dragon. These are also going to be where a lot of the House of the Dragon explained and reaction videos are going to come from. These we're going to be able to just talk with you guys more often. And we're just going to kind of see what your guys' thoughts are. I just got done watching it, so this is my very fresh first reactions to the episode. And we're going to talk about in this kind of my things I liked, things I was okay with. I don't think there's anything I really hated in this episode. I, for the most part, thought it was a very good and strong episode 1, where it did a lot of tying in and did a good job of incorporating itself into the Game of Thrones universe for people that are not, as, let's say, super fans, I guess, as to have read Fire and Blood. If this is like their first introduction into the story, did a lot of great callbacks with the music, the visuals, even lines. We see something towards the very end that I was not expecting at all, that they tie into the idea of the White Walkers, which I thought was very interesting as well. Now, the first thing I want to talk about before we get into the entire story, because I want to kind of go through almost scene by scene what was going on and what was the things I liked about each scene and the things that how they built on. How are you, Matthew? I'm very happy it's House of the Dragon Day. I really wish I didn't work on Sunday nights, because I pretty much, as soon as I get off, I have to watch them. But, it is what it is. But very happy with the episode. Something that I thought was really interesting is the way that this episode changed how I viewed Daemon, because Daemon, to me, when I started this episode, and I got maybe not the first half, but I think the first quarter, I wasn't really liking the way that they were taking Daemon's character, because it almost felt like they were making him much more of a villain to begin it out. And then we kind of get more in depth with Daemon. We see he's not this perfect dude where he's full of confidence and all this. He's kind of dealing with a lot of stress as being the heir. Is he not the heir? He wants that. Or does he want that really? And I think they did a really great job of handling Daemon. This first episode, to me, the best thing there's two things I think they did really, really well. One, I think Viserys' relationship with his wife is very good. It's not something we get in the book Fire and Blood at all. We really don't see inside the relationship at all. It's kind of something that's very brushed upon, where it's like Viserys becomes king, his wife fails to give him heirs, and then we kind of move on. I really love that what they do in this episode is they make you very much like Rhaenyra's mother and show her that she's a very likable character, and she's kind of very unfortunate in the way her pregnancies have not come to term that well, and that she's it seems like a very good person, and you kind of feel for her and her situation. And that was, to me, something that was really tragic and heartbreaking when we get to kind of, I think it's like maybe the 3/4 the way through the episode, or about a little over halfway, when we end up seeing her die. And it's even worse because it's a situation where Viserys has to choose, right? Because it looks like his wife is going to die in childbirth regardless. He's given this option that, we can try and cut the baby out. Now, this is brutal in the way that there's really nothing to numb the pain. They don't really, like it's just there. Like, she knows what's going on, and it's very heartbreaking, and it's quite disturbing to watch, which is good, because something that I thought they might do with House of the Dragon is they were gonna not show as much gory stuff off, and this was something that, it's not as bad as like Shireen, say, in Game of Thrones, but I think it's something that is very difficult to watch. If I was a woman, for instance, like, that would have been even more difficult to watch, as someone where, if you're a woman and you have a fear of birthing a child, say you're a smaller woman, that's something that'd be very difficult to watch. And I'm glad that they were very realistic and show kind of what would have happened in that scenario. So that gives me a lot of hope for the future, that they're going to stick to things like that, because there are a lot of things in the Dance of Dragons that are very brutal and are very, let's just say, not the most friendly things in the world. But that was, to me, a highlight. Daemon, as Matthew said as well, was definitely a highlight of the episode. I think they really did a great job of evolving his character from the book. Where the book, we don't really see a lot of Daemon, where we hear a lot about him, more or less, from other characters, which is something that I love that the show is doing, and we're leaning a lot more on Daemon, where Daemon's an interesting character for me, where I'm not sure how audiences that have not read the book and don't know where his character is or don't know a lot of his history are going to react to him, because he's a character that is very flawed, right? We see him, his biggest thing towards the end of the episode and why he gets kind of removed from office and from King's Landing as a whole is this idea that he's in this brothel with a lot of his men from the Gold Cloaks, and he utters the phrase, king or heir for a day. And it doesn't feel like Daemon wanted to say that, or Daemon didn't want to have this speech. When we cut to Daemon in the beginning of the scene, he seems very unsure of himself or unsure what is to come, because he's already heard them debating who should become the new king. And it's interesting when you see that, because Daemon sees a lot of what's going on in the council, as he tells his brother in their final scene together in episode 1, is that there's so many people tugging at Viserys for their own agendas, right? And that's another thing I was just about to talk about that Matthew brings up in the chat, is that I really loved Daemon's scenes with Rhaenyra as well, where in the book we never really get this, where the maester that's writing the book, or the kind of the idea there, is that it's very much that Daemon was just being selfish. He didn't really care about Rhaenyra, and she was kind of more of an ends, where like he was trying to move up the ladder and he was kind of being weird with her. Daemon feels very much like an uncle that cares about Rhaenyra, where he actually is trying to be someone that is positive in her life, where we see all these other moments where Daemon's very what's the word I'm looking for, where he's very antagonistic, where like if you're Otto Hightower, right, Daemon sees through who Otto Hightower is, and Daemon kind of plays with that, where when we see with Daemon with Rhaenyra, Daemon's actually being a good uncle, giving her good advice, when Daemon sees that his brother Viserys is really struggling with the loss of his wife and also child. And the worst part is you look at the decision that Viserys makes to try and save the child. He puts his wife through so much pain and suffering for it to not matter in the end. You can see where Viserys is at, right? And I think that's something that's really good, and it's something that I loved in this episode, is we show the humanity of a lot of characters, something that I've talked about that Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul does, where Viserys, when they even get to this meeting after his wife dies, right, and his child dies, they're talking about, who is going to be the heir. And it's something that is, again, it's very important, right? But if you're looking at it from a normal human's way of interpreting events, right? If you had just lost your wife, who Viserys truly loved, we can tell from this episode that he really loved this woman, and also the prospect of your child has also just been killed, you don't want to be speaking about who is going to rule after your own death, whether that be your brother or your daughter. That's a very difficult thing to see, and it's something that I think makes a lot of sense with where Viserys is like, I don't want to speak about this, and gets very upset. And I really loved that dynamic between Viserys, Rhaenyra, and Daemon. Another thing I loved about the dynamic between Rhaenyra and Viserys is we see a bit more of inside Rhaenyra's head, where there's something we don't get in House of the Dragon, and it's something that I really love that we're getting to see in House of the Dragon, where we're getting a lot more built on characters, right? This is something that I really love when we get adaptations, where we're taking characters that we're not inside their heads, right, at certain times, whether it's like Lord of the Rings or House of the Dragon, because we're not inside of these characters' heads in the book, is that we can expand on their characters, right? We can spend... Rhaenyra is in a place where she very much feels like an unwanted child, where Viserys is always wanting this boy, and Rhaenyra kind of feels like, what is her place almost? And I love that idea that Rhaenyra was never someone that expected to be in this position of being queen, but once she is in that position, she takes it very seriously and tries her best to learn from the council and her father. I really like that. That is a very strong foundation for Rhaenyra's character that I think they did a very good job, because that's what episode 1's supposed to be. Episode 1's not supposed to be We're getting into all of these big ideas and conflicts and big action sets. Episode 1 is supposed to start these characters in a place where they have a strong foundation, and I think they did a very good idea, um, where I think a lot of characters started out really well. Matthew, I do completely understand what you mean with the almost sexual vibes with Rhaenyra when he gives her the necklace, but I don't know, like, that's kinda how I felt when I first saw that scene, but I think the scenes after it that kind of build upon that scene, I think it does feel more just like a family thing at this point. I don't think at this point, based on what we've seen, that Daemon views Rhaenyra as someone that he could potentially have like a relationship with. I don't think that's really gotten into his head yet at this point. I think the scene itself was a bit awkward, where if they were gonna go that route, I understand. But I think with the context of other scenes where Daemon's being a very kind of supportive uncle to Rhaenyra when the funeral's going on and kind of taking up that mantle, he does seem like he genuinely cares about her. So I think for me, I think that scene is heavily impacted by the other scenes. That is true. That is something that's very difficult to predict because me and you, Matthew, knowing the story, we know what's eventually going to happen. But it's very hard to tell from this point what are the directors trying to do. But yeah. I was satisfied that they made Aemma Cara Albert short, someone we have agreed. That is something I really loved Tulkas from the first episode because it makes her death really impactful. It makes that way more impactful if we just start it and she isn't really a character, she doesn't have any scenes, and then she just dies. It doesn't really hit us that hard, right? And that's another thing that they're doing is they're building up Viserys as this character as well that we're actually going to genuinely care about. That has a lot on his shoulders where. As his brother, he has Otto Hightower, he has Corlys Velaryon, all these characters that are kind of tearing him apart and tearing him in different directions while also trying to prepare the kingdom for other things. It's really good. I think they did a very good job of building up characters in this first episode, and I really love that idea of it. Now, another thing that I like that they built on the Rhaenyra's character specifically is the idea that Rhaenyra is not kind of the perfect princess, right? I kind of get a lot of Sansa and Arya vibes for some reason when you look at Alicent and Rhaenyra, where Alicent seems like the very kind of uptight, or maybe not uptight, but maybe that's not the correct wording, but the very politically educated, right? Like Sansa was always this character that was very polite, kind of always on time, all that kind of stuff. And Arya kind of wasn't. Arya was the character that wasn't really that kind of a character. That's kind of how I feel Rhaenyra is. Rhaenyra is the character where she likes to ride dragons. She's kind of late for things. She cares more about checking on her mother than being this cupbearer in this meeting. That's kind of the vibes I get from Alicent and Rhaenyra. I don't think it's as extreme as Arya and Sansa, but I feel a little bit of that between them. And I think it is interesting that that is something that I think may even come up as a division between the two. But we also have really good character moments between Alicent and Rhaenyra having this kind of friendship younger in life where they're kind of gossiping or they're kind of looking at, Kristen Cole, which is a good scene. There's a lot of interesting things. And another thing we see from Viserys that I think is very interesting in this episode that I think is also very important to build upon is how Viserys either doesn't see the tension or the division between Daemon and Viserys, or he overlooks it. He's like, just get over it, guys. It's fine. Where that's a major point of emphasis in this episode. We see multiple times where there's just situations like Daemon specifically, calling out to, have a joust with Otto Hightower's son and some things like that, that we just feel like as an audience you can kind of tell there's a lot of tension here, but Viserys almost kind of plays it off as, oh, it's just friendly competition and stuff. I didn't feel that with Ama or her baby, to be honest. Like I felt nothing when she died. They didn't really dug in enough with the more than a few characters we did. Did you think Ama looked a little too Targaryen? Yes, that is something that I thought was kind of odd that she looked that Targaryen when that really isn't kind of what her character looks like. But I'm kind of okay to kind of overlook that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I was the opposite. It actually did have an effect on me. I really thought that was a very good scene for me. We have to remember Aemma was Rhaenyra's mother. That Aaron bloodline plays into her. That is correct. Um, but yeah, no, I think there was a lot of good things in this episode. Some of the more like things I was like, I don't like this tie-in. So in the thumbnail, I made the thumbnail very quickly. Like that was like a 1 to 2 minute thumbnail because I wanted to hop on, do a little stream with you guys talking about the episode, so I could get this kind of edited down, and then this will be more of an explanation video for tomorrow. But one thing that I thought was a little odd was the tie-in of Aegon the Conqueror having this vision that the White Walkers were gonna, or the cold or something was gonna come down, and this is kind of tied into this dagger that eventually Arya is going to use to kill the Night King. I thought that was a very odd choice, just seeing upon how many people hate that decision to have Arya be the one to kill him and the way that happens. So I just think that was a very weird choice for me. I like because it's something that ties into Game of Thrones, which again is something they're going to be looking forward to, or they're going to try and do because Game of Thrones is their big kind of success, more or less, for bringing in audiences. And a lot of people will not know what the story really is about. Like, there's not, like, us as a community are in the minority of knowing what the story actually is about. So they're going to want to have these tie-ins. But it's a weird tie-in when you look at it as something that most people hated. So I thought that was kind of weird to me. I thought, I will say everything surrounding that scene, though, was very good, with Viserys kind of almost apologizing to Rhaenyra, saying, that he's always overlooked her and not treated her how she should be as his first kind of, child. And I thought that was a very good scene. I like how they played into Rhaenyra becoming the queen and how this was kind of unexpected for her and how she's going to have to take on this mantle. We then have kind of some lords pledging to her, which is interesting. So I would say, as a starting episode as a whole, that this episode, I would say, is like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. I think it did a very good job of setting the pace, showing what the series is going to be about, and setting those in motion, and doing all of that. Let me know what you guys think on that. If you guys agree with me, if you guys think it's a little lower, it's not a crazy episode like I've talked about it, because it's episode 1. Now, I will say, Game of Thrones started out a bit hotter. It got you hooked into the series a lot quicker, just because of Bran and all that. But I really liked the episode, but there was a few things that was wrong in the writing or that I didn't like. Very minuscule problems, though. Overall, good episode, not great, but it was good. I'm curious, what things did you not like in the writing? What specific things did you not like? Because for the most part, I think they did pretty well. There were some things that I thought were okay. I thought there were interesting choices. But yeah, for me, I thought it was pretty good overall. But let me switch on to the Hightowers, because I'm someone that loves to talk about more of the Targaryens. But let's talk on about the Hightowers. I think they did a really good job of naturally showing why the Hightowers, specifically Otto Hightower, doesn't like Daemon, because in the book Fire and Blood, right, the whole hatred between the two really stems from this idea that Daemon slept with Alicent. That's where pretty much it starts off with in Fire and Blood. It was something that I thought was always really weird. And I think that's something that I don't know if they're going to play on that anymore. I highly doubt it, because this would have been the time you could have done it. And that was something that I was very interested in learning, is if they were going to go that route. And it doesn't look like they're going to go that route, which I really like. I don't think they should go that route. But I think it became off way more natural, because Otto Hightower is someone that's a bit more cautious and is not as like flamboyant as Daemon. And Otto is very much someone that is he's working for himself, right? He's trying to gain more power, put his family in a better position, very similar to Tywin. And we see how much power Otto even has already, whether that be kind of as Hand of the King or what the actions he does do. The secret, I hope, opens up an Order of the Green Hand plot. Oh boy. But yeah, no. So as we continue, we see things like Otto Hightower telling Alicent to kind of get closer to the king, and I won't spoil where that's going, but I think it's a little obvious where it's going if you have not seen or heard what happens there. But just some things that are setting up Otto Hightower to be this Tywin-esque character. He, for me, now again, I'm very biased, but for me, I think it's the idea that Otto Hightower is kind of almost set up to be the villain, where he it's so hard to like kind of describe it with not going into spoilers of what's going to happen in the next like couple episodes, but it is interesting. The writing was good, but they made minuscule mistakes. I found, for example, Corlys vowing to the old gods, kind of, and Viserys saying he was the king of the Roy. That is true. That is kind of some things that are a little weird as to why they would do those things. Another character I want to talk about that, well, I'd say two characters. They didn't get a lot of screen time in episode 1, but I think were pretty good in the scenes they were in. Corlys Velaryon and also Rhaenys, they were very good in the episode when they were kind of there. I really like Rhaenys. I really like the portrayal they're going for. She kind of gives me the vibes of Olenna from the main show. So I really like the way they kind of did her direction in that idea. Something that I think is a little interesting is, if I'm not mistaken, Rhaenys is very much described as being not looking like the traditional Targaryen. She's described more as kind of having some of the Baratheon kind of features. And she really doesn't in the show, which I think is meant to just not confuse people, just to show that she's a Targaryen, which again makes sense. But I thought that was an interesting choice. I think Corlys and all the scenes he was in, also very good performances there. I think that for the most part was a very good casting. I think really for the most part I liked all the casting of the major characters. We haven't seen a lot of Kristen Cole yet, so I'm not sure how I feel about him yet, but I think he looks the part at least. The Joust, another good one. I think it was a very well shot, looked very nice. Something I didn't even talk about much in this kind of stream or the review yet is I thought the cinematography, a lot of the shots they did in this episode were very good. I think the music was very good. The music did enough to where, like, you had some of the old themes, right? So you had, like, the first theme with Robert Baratheon. You have some of the Targaryen music with Daenerys. They brought back some of these older songs or music for the original show, kind of redid it a bit, and also added in some of their own kind of new music. So I think that was on par. Costumes were, or I guess the clothing everybody was wearing was great. I think from a visual standpoint and everything else, I think they killed it. And that's something they always did well in Game of Thrones, so. Aegon's dream, though, is definitely something got me saying what could end up being a major plot hole. Yeah, that's something I just didn't understand why it was in there. It was something that, for me, right, like, for the whole episode, right, was pretty happy with everything they'd done. I thought there was a couple things here and there where I was like, okay, I'm fine with this. But something that I thought that was a very odd thing to throw in there. It felt very forced, right? Like, there's things where, like, Marvel, right? Marvel's a big one right now. She-Hulk just came out. I actually haven't watched it, but I've watched a lot of reviews, and there's things that feel very forced in it, like political agendas and also kind of how She-Hulk treats Hulk, but that's not the point. I think for me, that was a really, 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 really weird thing to bring up. I don't think it should have been in it. I'm interested to see where they go with that idea, but I think that was a very odd thing to put into the show. That felt really as just a callback to Game of Thrones. We have to remember with TV, it's entertainment aimed for a general audience. Hardcore fans, us will always second guess. Agreed. So this is something that I think will always be, and it's something that I'll try to be very careful with when I'm talking about like spoilers. But yeah, I think the general audience is always going to be preferred to the hardcore fans, which is a good and bad thing, right? Because the general audience will leave a lot quicker than the hardcore fans will. But yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see where. Another thing I was a little surprised by was how quickly they brushed past Jaehaerys, the end of Jaehaerys' reign, and how Viserys was picked. I thought they were going to give that a little bit of time just to kind of develop what the main theme of the show is going to be, or what I think it should be, where it's the idea of a woman ruling. But I don't know. I think that was an interesting decision. I don't blame them for just getting straight into the actual show, but I think that would have added a lot more to not only Viserys' character, but also Rhaenys' character, and also would have provided a lot more to the theme of the act. I gotta breathe. Of the actual show, but again, I don't blame them there. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Did you guys think they were gonna spend a little bit more time on the end of Jaehaerys' reign, or did you expect them to kind of just blow past it really quickly? I just hope that it doesn't become a Game of Thrones redemption show. I don't think it's going to be, but something like that I feel like was very forced. I saw She-Hulk. It's pretty funny. It's decent. I heard it was funny, but I heard like some of the story elements of it was not the best. I don't know. Hi, Liam. How are you? Have you seen House of the Dragon yet? Have you seen the first episode? I thought it was pretty good. Spend more time? Yeah, that's what I personally thought. I think it would have also helped the show, but, you know, I can't blame them. I can't really blame them for skipping past that element of the show. Okay, I'm trying to think. The dragons, another thing. The dragons, I think, for the most part, looked fine. I don't think they looked spectacular. I've seen a lot of reviews where people are like, wow, the dragons look so much better than Game of Thrones. I don't know if I'd go that far. I think they were good. I don't think they were great. Was kind of disappointed that we didn't get to see Balerion. Yeah, I kind of was too. Maybe we'll get a flashback in the future. It's very possible with the idea that they just brought in that Aegon had these dreams and all that. So maybe we'll see something with Balerion. It is possible. Yeah, definitely. I think there is a good possibility we could get more flashbacks, especially when. So there's a scene that hasn't happened yet that is in the teasers with Rhaenys talking to Rhaenyra about how a woman will never be able to ascend the throne. I think what would be interesting is that when that scene happens, they kind of do a flashback to Rhaenys and all of her struggles. Did you see how when the knights were fighting and killing each other, they zoomed into Laenor, making it seem as though it was his BF? I did notice that. I didn't really put that together like you did, Liam. But yeah, I think that's a very interesting one because that is the second thing that I'm really looking forward to is when they start trying to figure out who they're going to marry Rhaenyra to. How is that conversation going to go? Because in the books, it's very much forced upon Rhaenyra. And the idea is that everyone here knows that Laenor is gay. Like, or bisexual, whichever. And everybody just doesn't care, really. So I'm interested to see how that conversation goes as well. We saw we did see his skull, but at this point, it's like we've already seen his skull multiple times in Game of Thrones. That's not really groundbreaking. Like, it'd have been cool to actually see him as a dragon. Agreed, Matthew. But yeah, no. So there was some questionable things when it came to that as well. Let's see. What other characters do we want to talk about? The Golden Cloak. So I want to talk about Daemon's like scene with the Golden Cloaks, and kind of how he goes about that. I thought it was interesting the way that was framed because when I read Fire and Blood, that's really never the way I saw that as, because it kind of it gives me vibes like Daemon and the Golden Cloaks were kind of the Nazi police, where they just kind of like, okay, we're gonna go into the streets and just start rounding people up. I really thought that was awkward, and I didn't. That was in the first like half, and that's why I really didn't like the way they were portraying Daemon to start out with. But I don't know, because the way I interpreted it from the book, and now again they have their own interpretation. I interpreted it as, okay, they were still doing their job. They were just a bit, a little tougher on people, right? But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. Maybe I could be wrong on that one. Did you have troubles with watching it? I did not. So I watched it on HBO on my phone. But no, I had really no troubles watching it. I think Rhaenyra getting matched with Laenor will be next episode. It should be. It should be. Now, I am interested to see the pacing of the episode, or the episodes, because it should be a 10 episodes like Game of Thrones was. And they've already exceeded where I thought they were going to get to by the first episode. I thought the first episode was going to spend a lot of time on, maybe not a lot of time, but I thought maybe we would get like a good 10 to 15 minutes of Jaehaerys's council type thing. But I don't know. I thought we might get a little bit more, be a little bit slower paced, but yeah. And maybe if they had a flashback to Viserys' coronation would have been better. Yeah, I think that could have been there as well. Yeah, same here, but I'm glad they talked about it in the next scene saying, what the fuck, why did you do this? Agreed. Because it seemed really odd. It seemed like Daemon was kind of going in and just beating the shit out of just random people that were like not even criminals. What I think made the scene better is Otto Hightower kind of going, yeah, these were actual criminals. Like these were people that were committing crimes. Because then I'm like, okay, I can see it a bit more now where it's like Daemon, if it's his character, he's trying to kind of put fear into the people of not Game of Thrones, of King's Landing to not commit crimes. And he just, I don't know, it kind of shows who Daemon is as a person. So I was kind of fine with it after the scene, but the scene and the way it was shot, it was seen like, it was odd. It was just awkward, it felt like, for me. I think it would have been better if we see that scene where it's not like Viserys is going out like we're about to just, like go in and just mess some people up. Like if it would have been more of a thing where it's like they have these set criminals, it's made established that these are people that are criminals. Like I know it says like this guy's a rapist or this is this and this, or this guy's a thief, that's why they cut off his hand. But it seems very unclear if these people are actually committing crimes or anything like that. What are you talking about, Liam, on Rhaenys? I was surprised it stayed in the same time for so long. Really? Because I personally thought if going into the episode, this is what I thought was going to happen. I thought the first 10 to 15 minutes was probably going to be talking about how Viserys comes to be king. Then I thought we were going to get a flash forward after about 10, 15 minutes where we go to Rhaenyra's kind of younger life, basically where the episode kind of starts, right? Like that first, like after we have Rhaenyra's little talk or whatever. I thought we were going to get to that about 10, 15 minutes. We were going to have an introductory into all these characters. And then maybe by the end of the episode, we would have kind of gotten into Viserys' like heir and stuff like that and all that conversation. And then focused on Daemon and Criston Cole's joust and all that stuff in the next episode. That's kind of how I thought it might have gone, but I'm interested to see how that goes. I think they should have spent more time with Rhaenys before Harrenhal. I agree. I think they should have developed Rhaenys a bit more, because Rhaenys is a very massive character in the Dance of the Dragons. And I think with the first episode being a episode where it's supposed to establish a lot of characters, Rhaenys really gets put to the kind of the wayside. Like she really has one scene in which she even has dialogue in, really. I don't know. I didn't like the way she was kind of sidelined, but the problem is you have so many characters that need to be developed, like in episode 1, your main ones like Rhaenyra and all that. And agreed, Matthew, because the thing is that I think is really brilliant about the Dance of the Dragons is the idea that Rhaenyra and Rhaenys' stories are very similar, right? They're very similar in the way things happen. They are the eldest heir to the throne, but one of them gets to actually, they're said to be, they're going to take the throne, but someone again takes it from them. And I think they have a very parallel story. And I think introducing that theme earlier on in the story would have been a lot better, because we don't really get any idea on Rhaenys story. We just know she got passed up. I love the conversation between Rhaenyra and Viserys at the end of the... Yeah, I thought that conversation was really good as well. I think they did a really good job of establishing their relationship. I think Rhaenyra, all of her relationships in this episode, they did a really great job of. The only part of that I didn't like was the inclusion of the Catspaw dagger. I didn't really love that idea. I thought that was a little odd and kind of felt forced for me, but, Let me think of some other scenes that I want to talk about. I'm trying to think. Is there any other scenes that I really want to talk about? We've kind of talked about a lot of them, just kind of sporadically around the entire stream. Let's do some at the end of the stream. It's going to be a shorter stream just because we're just doing an analysis. Let's give some predictions of where we think episode 2 is going to go. So episode 2... hold on. How did you find the scene with Otto and Alicent after Aemma's death? I thought it was a pretty good scene because it shows that Otto is already planning his next move. And again, heavily showing the Tywin-esque part of Otto, where Tywin would use his children for his own personal gains to get the family into better positions. Otto is basically like, yeah, Alicent, go talk to Viserys, comfort him a little bit. Where's your mother's dress? Show the shoulders a little. And it really feels like Alicent isn't in that role yet, where she's not someone that's like that, where she's just kind of doing what her father wants her to do, and Otto doesn't really seem like he seems like he cares, and stuff like that. Like he's trying to comfort her a little bit with like talking about his mother or her mother, his wife. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a pretty good scene as well. It kind of foreshadows what Otto and Alicent are going to be up to within the rest of the season and for future seasons as well. I didn't like Corlys or Rhaenys. I'm kind of surprised by that. I liked both of those characters. I wanted Rhaenys to have more time. But yeah, no, I think Rhaenys would have been a better. I think Corlys and Rhaenys would have been a better character in episode 1 if they were given more time. But they just really, in episode 1, were not the focus, I guess, of episode 1. So hopefully they get more time to be developed in future episodes. I like Alicent a bit better than Rhaenyra. I mean, that is completely fair. Again, I have a personal bias. I love Rhaenyra. She's my favorite character, not just in the show, but also in Fire and Blood and the Targaryen history as a whole. But Alicent is made to be very likable, seeming very proper, someone that kind of is put together and is a really good political figure, right? And Rhaenyra is kind of the opposite of that, right? Where Rhaenyra is someone that she's kind of like Arya in a way, and I've talked about this in the stream earlier, but Rhaenyra is not someone that really wants to be the court lady, right? She wants to ride her dragons, she wants to go across the narrow sea and all these things. She very much is different to Alicent in that way. I didn't like them in that episode. I mean, oh, okay, yeah. I would kind of agree with you then. Because I wanted more of them in the episode. I feel like they should have shed a bit more light about the Triarchy, seeing what was going on in the East a bit more. Yeah. That's another thing I think they could have focused on a bit more. And I think it's something that they will focus on maybe in the next episode. I think it's definitely something that they could start to dive into, but yeah, I think there's certain things, Matthew, that I feel like they had to gloss over, because all of this information for a new viewer might have overwhelmed them. It's kind of how Game of Thrones was in the first episode, where it doesn't try to throw too much at you. and then it starts to slowly build on top of those things. Because this is again a story that if you're someone that just watched Game of Thrones, you would have no idea what's going on really. Like you need to be babied into the show, because if you're watching Game of Thrones, Dance of the Dragons is mentioned I think one single time by Shireen. So it's something that I think because of the general audience, you kind of gotta have to get babied into it a bit more. I'm on vacation, so we'll watch stream later. Well, I'm glad you made it in here to, tell me, a young wolf. I hope you like the stream when you watch later. I will also probably be cutting this stream into a video later, maybe adding some things to it as well. I think Patty Viserys did the best or one of the best job in that. Yes, I agree. I think Viserys, or the actor that plays Viserys, had the best performance the first episode, as he should. Very similar to like a Mark Addy performance, Robert Baratheon, where they both played their, older kings very well. And I think he did really good. I think him and Daemon, I think were my two, or Matt Smith, were my two standout performances from episode 1. They did have the most screen time outside of Rhaenyra, probably, but I think both of them did a really good job. And I think one thing I'm really happy about is I think they got the right casting for Daemon. I really think he's going to be great, and I'm excited to see him in future episodes as we kind of see where his character goes. But yeah, so I'm interested to see, because by episode 10, I would expect an event to happen. I think a lot of you know what event that is going to be to happen. I'm going to be interested to see how quickly we get through Rhaenyra's early life to where she's kind of, I guess, at odds with a certain character. Again, I'm trying to stay not spoiler. I know I've done a couple of things in this stream already where it's kind of spoilers, but I'm trying to kind of stay a little, not spoiling everything. I think Matt Smith is a tremendous actor. Yeah, he did a very good job. I think the way he's able to, without even saying any words, express how Daemon is feeling. We got two different scenes where Daemon seems very vulnerable and seems very unsure of himself, or unsure of what is going to happen. I think those are two of my favorite scenes from the entire episode because of his acting. He did a very good job. Yeah, I get that, but still, I agree. How far back do you think it will go? What do you mean by that, Liam? Do you mean like how far do I think the show will like get into the history of the Targaryens, like as in like where it will stop at? Because if you want my personal opinion, I would say the best spot to end the show would be Aegon III when he becomes king. I think that is when I would stop the show. Because I think that's a good tie-in to the entire plot, the war, and it would be kind of a thing where it's like you're going to have some peace, even though Aegon III's rule has a decent amount of corruption and stuff. And there's a lot of things that go on during his rule, but I think his kind of coronation would be where I would end it. Let me know, Liam, if that is what you meant by that question, or if you wanted me to answer something else. But yeah, that's kind of how I took that question. Do we know how many seasons it's going to be? Because if I was going to predict it, I would say it's probably going to be, I think if you really wanted to stuff it all into, you could do it in 2 seasons, but I would say 3 seasons would be a safer bet. But I'm not sure how. Let's look up right now how many seasons they want to do for it. House of the Dragon. How many seasons? Do we know how many? Let me read an article real quick. Okay, so it's unknown. I would assume 3. That would be my guess. Oh, I meant how far back as in flashbacks. I think personally we could see maybe an Aegon the Conqueror with like Balerion, especially because they mentioned it. So maybe we could see Aegon with a dagger or something along the lines of that. But I think that is about as far back as they will go. I liked how they did Kristen Cole. Kind of want to see more of his backstory. I know that they said he was a squire to the Dondarrions, but to unseat Daemon off horseback must be a hell of a warrior. Yeah, I think they will get more into more of him as a character. I just don't think they had time in the first episode. I think that's someone that definitely, because he's going to be someone that's going to be very close to Rhaenyra. Maybe not in episode 2, but definitely. Actually, yeah, he should be very close to Rhaenyra in episode 2. That should be something that should happen in next episode. But yeah, so hopefully we should get more of that. I think they said 3, 2 is confirmed, 1 is made. Okay. So yeah, I think personally 3 would be where I would look to go. If I was them, I think 3 is better than 2, because I think you have a lot to pack in if you're going to do 2 seasons worth. And I also think you should do the after effects, like I said, getting all the way to Aegon the Third. So to me, I think 3 seasons would be good for me. Now I think they can realistically, I think they could end it on 2 different endings. One being an ending I'm not going to talk about, or also Aegon the Third. I definitely expect to see at least one flashback of Aegon the Conqueror. Agreed. I think just the way that they set that whole thing up, I think there has to be one at this point. But I don't know. I also think I loved about Rhaenys is she kind of talks about how all of these knights here, they don't really know what war is. They're very green. It very much gives you kind of the vibes of how the Tyrell forces were in Renly's camp, where none of these guys really known war. And if you think about the context of the kind of prelude to the Dance of Dragons, there hasn't really been a war in Westeros in most people's lifetime. So I think that was a really interesting one. Me personally, I think 4 would be a good number. I could see 4 as well. I think 3 because I don't think they're going to, if they do go all the way to Aegon the Third, I think they'll kind of gloss over some things, but I think I would love to see 4, but I don't want it to get too drawn out, if you know what I mean. They talked about Maegor a lot, yes. Maegor, which I think is understandable to talk about Maegor a lot, but at the same time, like, the amount of stuff to talk about Maegor, but they don't really talk about Jaehaerys at all, which is kind of odd, because Jaehaerys at this point is probably the best king that's ever been a Targaryen. I think he's the best Targaryen king in general, but it's very interesting that no one really talked about Jaehaerys after like the first kind of scene, because the prime example of how to be a king or how to rule is Jaehaerys, not Aegon. Aegon is the prime example of how to conquer and how to invade, I guess, whereas Jaehaerys is kind of more of a peacetime one. I hope they flesh out character stories more. I think they will. It's just one of those things where you have to focus on your main characters first. You can't delve into all the other characters this early on, and it'll just basically overload viewers, I think, is what they were thinking in that idea. Because the thing is, they also are going to have to flesh out other main characters that are going to plop up, but yeah. Like how Game of Thrones did characters having their own thing going. Yeah, agreed. And I think we've already kind of seen that with some characters, right? So Otto Hightower, we know he has his own thing going. Daemon, we know he kind of has his own issues going on and his own character flaws and things that motivate him. I think we've seen a lot of that, but I think the further we get in the show, we'll see more of that just based upon having more time to do things. We don't have to focus so heavily on developing Daemon or Rhaenyra as much, because a lot of that groundwork has been established in this episode. But I think that is going to be the end of the stream. I just want to do a quick stream, talk to you guys about my first kind of initial reactions to the first episode of House of the Dragon. I'll probably add some more into tomorrow's video. I'll probably cut a lot of this and then also, or not cut a lot of it, but cut some of it and then also add some more for tomorrow's video, doing kind of a review and talking about it. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching. Probably gonna be doing these every week after they come out. And then also probably doing the review videos on Monday, and then we'll kind of have some like normal videos in between there, like normal Song of Ice and Fire videos, and then I'll probably have like a talking video on episode 2 coming out probably around Friday. Also, when do you think we will see Harwin Strong? I think there's an off chance we see him in next episode. I think next episode or episode 3. That would be my prediction. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow's video.